Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel, and you're watching TechStrong TV on the Digital Anarchist Network for Tuesday, March 31st, and welcome. For those of you who didn't catch our initial broadcast yesterday, TechStrong TV is something we're going to be doing here at Media Ops every day. We're going to start with a 2-hour lineup of scheduling, and we're going to expand that to 4 hours, probably within the next week to two. And really, what is TechStrong TV? If you didn't watch yesterday, it's our response to what's going on in the world. Hey, many of you watching this are watching it from home. Rather than watching it on your computer screen, maybe you're watching it on Roku TV or Apple TV or Amazon Fire, or perhaps on a mobile app on your tablet. We're working from home. It's a strange time, or at least an unusual time for many of us. Surreal in some ways. And if you're like me, you're probably tired of listening to the news. It's kind of a bad news generator, and we want to know what's going on. It's important, but we don't need it 24/7. If you're also like me, you're probably spending a lot of nights binging on Netflix and Amazon and Hulu and Disney and Apple and what have you. But we're thinking that, again, if you're like me, you're out there and you want to hear what's going on in tech news. You want to find out, keep learning, keep expanding your expertise in what's happening in tech and software development, DevOps, digital transformation, cloud native, and cybersecurity. Well, those are the areas we're going to cover every day here, and we're really happy for you to join us. Whether you're watching us live or perhaps on a tape delay, do try to make time to check us out every day. And you'll see over the next week as we expand, we're going to start making this a little bit more interactive. I'd like to open a Slack channel and get some audience feedback. We're working on that. We'd like to open a Zoom room and allow some folks to come on here. We will be scheduling more live interviews as well. So, this is our second day, day 2, as we roll this out. Give us a chance and we'll get this going. The other thing I wanted to mention, that along with, why the name TechStrong, is that in spite of everything that we're all dealing with, tech will go on. We will continue to develop. We will continue to deploy. We will continue to monitor, and we'll continue to protect our IT assets. And because that's what the tech community does. We may not be able to meet in person. We may be doing virtual and on-air stuff like this, but we will move that. We will continue to do so. As part of that, I also want to mention that we are holding TechStrong Conference, a virtual conference, on June 4th. And we'd love to have you guys check it out. The website will be up shortly, announcing our first set of speakers, and it's techstrongcon.com. And of course, you can follow along on the web here at techstrong.tv or digitalanarchist.live and digitalanarchist.com. Anyway, with that being said, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Let's jump into our programming for today. We do, as I mentioned, have about 2 hours worth of programming lined up for you. And some of it is coming out of our video archives. We have, between our YouTube channel of DevOps TV on YouTube and our Digital Anarchist archives, we literally have thousands of great interviews that we'll be pulling from selectively, only the best, over these next few weeks to supplement our live programming. So we'll be right back with some stuff, but before we do, a quick word from our sponsors.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel, and we're back here on TechStrong TV over the Digital Anarchist Network. Thanks for staying with us. Next, I want to bring to you a video. Our next segment's going to be a video, and it's actually one of my most favorite interviews that I've conducted in 5-6 years of doing interviews as part of DevOps.com and Digital Anarchist. This is an interview I did. I believe it was at DevOps Enterprise Summit in London in 2019, and I call it my PhD panel because all three members were PhDs. It features Dr. Steven Spears, who comes out of MIT, Dr. Nicole Forsgren, of course, from Dora. She's now with GitHub at Microsoft, and before that, Google Cloud. And really the star of the panel is Dr. Christina Maslik, probably the foremost authority in the world on worker burnout. And you know what? I picked this to show today for a couple of reasons. Number one, as I said, it is one of my favorites. But secondly, even though you're working from home, many and most of you probably are watching this, don't think that working from home doesn't subject you to burnout. For many of us, we are now juggling being a homeschool teacher, taking care of the house, working in a very different environment than we're used to, trying to maintain keep our communication channels open with our coworkers, cohabiting with our family that we usually don't do during the day, and getting our work done. And burnout is real, and that's one of the main points of this interview. You're going to see that burnout is a real thing, so real, in fact, that it's been recognized by the medical authorities as a real condition. So this is a great interview with three really smart PhD folks, doctors, discussing it, including, as I said, Dr. Maslik, who's one of the leaders in the world on this. And so have a listen to it. It's rather long. It's about a half hour. We'll probably break it into two here, and you'll be able to come back. So here we are, Dr. Christina Maslik, Dr. Nicole Forsgren, and Dr. Steven Spear on worker burnout. Hey everyone, this is Alan Schimmel for DevOps.com on the Digital Anarchist video platform. And we're in London at the DevOps Enterprise Summit 2019. And really one of the highlights of the 3 days here for me is this panel. We are surrounded by PhD doctors here, and I'm really happy to have them. Let me introduce them and we'll get started. I'm going to start with my extreme right hand, where we have Dr. Christine Maslik. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to read your whole title, but if you would like to give them a little of your background, Dr. Maslik, I'd be honored.
Okay. I'm a professor of psychology and have been at the University of California, Berkeley for my whole career. And a good chunk of that has been doing research on burnout.
Some of groundbreaking research as well. Not
Thank
to
you.
embarrass you, but don't be too modest. To my, I guess, the man in the middle is Dr. Steven Spear, who has also appeared at DevOps Enterprise Summit before. But Dr. Spear, why don't you give them a little of your background?
Yeah, thanks. So currently I'm on the faculty at MIT in the Sloan School of Management. My work focuses very much on trying to understand and then replicate the ability of some organizations to deliver wicked more value into the marketplace than their counterparts. And a lot of my work is with companies and organizations of different types.
And also, not to embarrass you, but you've also done some groundbreaking
Thank you.
research and work as well. And those of us, I think, who've been lucky enough to attend some of your sessions here at DevOps Enterprise Summit and others have, and other places where you've presented and been published, have been lucky to see it. And then to my immediate right, really, this woman needs no introduction to our DevOps.com audience. She's a frequent guest and one of our rock stars. Dr. Nicole Forsgren. Dr. Nicole, welcome.
Thanks so much.
Just in case no one knows who you are, why don't you give them your background? Just
Sure.
to be consistent.
Sure. I do research and strategy at Google. I lead the Dora team, and prior to being at Google, I was CEO and co-founder of Dora. And I lead all of the state of DevOps research.
And DORA stands for DevOps Research and Assessment.
Yep.
And underneath that title is 6 years and 27,000 some responses to surveys.
Yeah, I think we're over 30-ish now.
30, yeah.
Yeah.
But this isn't a DORA research panel. Today, we're going to talk about what you guys are speaking about at DevOps Enterprise Summit. And Dr. Maslach, it's kind of right in your wheelhouse. So why don't we let you kick it off and
Right.
give us the high level about what we're talking about.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, my work has been on burnout, which I ran across serendipitously when I was interviewing people about something else, and what they really wanted to talk about was this unnamed thing, and eventually, began to focus on that, and people started calling it burnout, and, been working on that for many years. Many people have been doing research on burnout, so one of the exciting things is just a few weeks ago, the World Health Organization officially added burnout to its next publication of ICD, which is essentially international classification of, health issues. And so it was unanticipated. I was not near the internet at the time that came in, so it was kind of exciting. But they basically sort of validated a lot of the research and said it is an occupational phenomenon, an experience. They made it very clear it's not a disease, but it can have health implications, and people can be seeking out health professionals for help with this. And they defined it as a response to chronic stressors at work that have not been successfully managed. They listed the 3 elements of exhaustion, cynicism, and professional inefficacy. And so it was like, wow, this is really,
It's real.
really something, some big sort of thing. So this was exciting news just recently. With respect to work engagement, back in the 90s, my colleague Michael Leiter and I were really kind of trying to focus on, so what is the positive opposite? What are we trying to move towards if we're trying to prevent or reduce the risk of burnout? And this was a time of positive psychology, looking at positive things rather than negative. It was also that we found that people were reluctant to participate in research on burnout in the United States, because if it got known that there were problems, they could be sued. We are a very litigious, society. And so it was like, just tell me what to do. And I said, can you participate in some of our evaluative research on what might work? No, just tell me what to do. So we thought, well, maybe we can reframe some of this work in terms of moving in that positive direction, because people who did not score highly on burnout actually looked really pretty good in terms of what they were doing and how they were working. And we decided to call that engagement. Now, the problem with that is that engagement has been used as the same word for many related. They're all positive, but they all have different kind of definitions and different ways of getting at it. So in Europe, one of my colleagues that I had worked with before decided to make a separate engagement measure, the Utrecht scale, and that talks about vigor and dedication and absorption, getting into a flow. Gallup, which has surveys that a lot of companies use, has a very different definition, and so on the one hand, the positive thing is that we're all sort of saying we can get to a place where people really thrive and grow and do good things, with the work and take pride in, what they're accomplishing. How do we get there? The not so good news is that it's really not clear how you get there. And I think that's really the challenge. There's a lot of words, there's a lot of things about it, but it's not a simple thing saying, so go out.
Go be engaged.
Thrive, prosper, and
Go get engaged.
Yeah. So
Something like Jewish mothers and fathers say to their children.
do it.
Dr. Spear, what about you? Give us your take on this topic of engagement.
Yeah, so yesterday the doctor was giving a talk talking about the sort of the technical etymology of the term.
Yeah.
And I think the references you made were launching a rocket
Good.
and burning out the fuel before you hit your destination, or all a ball bearing and a mechanical device which burns out from wear and tear. I think the commonality for both those is the inefficient use of a resource and the ineffective use of it, so that it breaks, so that you're using it improperly, so it breaks down before you get the full value out of it. And I think that's probably true of people too, right? Which is we put people in organizations which are these wildly complex, interactive organisms, and then we don't properly support and engage them, so they have a sense of purposelessness, ineffectiveness, isolation, et cetera, and so all the potential they bring and all the aspirations they bring get burnt out because of this ineffective, inefficient use of people's time and energy.
Yeah, no, that's a nice way of putting it. Thank you. I'll remember that.
Dr. Nicole, let's bring this into IT and DevOps maybe down the road, but you've done so much research specifically with the IT teams. Some would say, oh yeah, this is a real big problem, but not for IT people. We're masters of the universe, right? We're developing all these applications that people use, and we're in such high demand, and we hop jobs every 6 months instead of asking for a raise. And why would we be the last people who you have to worry about for engagement or suffering burnout? Not true. I've been there. I've been in this industry almost 30 years. Talk to us. What have kind of things that you found and some of the data?
So it's interesting because I hear both sides, right? So sometimes I hear tech is the worst for burnout because we just push and push and push and push until we go. And I've heard burnout doesn't apply at all because all we have to do is maximize our output for a couple of years and then switch jobs, because particularly in Silicon Valley, we don't have the right incentives to make the workplace better, because all you have to do is switch jobs in 18 months to 3 years, and that's how you optimize your income. And so all you have to do is swap companies and find a better culture fit, and then you're good. And so organizations don't even have the right incentives to make the workplace better, to make engagement better, right? And so that's one of the reasons why I think starting in 2014 or 2015, we added a measure of burnout to the research to see if this was a phenomenon that was showing up in the data. Because again, at least as researchers, we appreciate that intuition and anecdata is important and is nice, but unless we can measure it, then it's not real. And we absolutely find that mismatches in values and mismatches in expectations really do lead to burnout. And it's not just overwork, right? I love that you talked about that in your presentation yesterday. It's not just pushing too much. It really is that combination of those three things, right? It's cynicism, it's exhaustion, it's workplace, inefficacy. It really is the three of those things, and it's showing up several places. And it's not just limited to, some people say, oh, it's just a tiny startup where you don't have the resources that you need, or oh no, it's just large organizations that don't care about how you're feeling. We're seeing it throughout the industry. And so it really is a problem.
I'd just like to kind of put a little cherry on this. Not a cherry, actually, it's the opposite. That's the, we talk about engagement and hopping. Oh, I'm not happy in this job, I'll jump to the next job. And I had burnout here, I'm going to go somewhere else. I mean, there is a dark, sinister, lethal side of burnout, right? And I've seen it, unfortunately, firsthand in our industry, where burnout leads to depression and I mean, just to life and death situations, right? I mean, that's the truth of it. And so not to it's great to speak about it from an academic level, but I want our people at home to understand when we talk about burnout, this is something that it's life and death for some people, right? And I'll never forget the first time one of a friend of mine took his own life, seemed like a happy person. It sounds so stupid, right?
Yeah.
Seemed like a happy person. You know, had a good job,
Yeah.
but
But
you
it-
don't know what
Not
lurks
then.
in the heart, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's unfortunate, beyond unfortunate. What can we do? How do we identify before it gets to that level?
Yeah.
What can we do as an industry?
Yeah.
You know, what does our research tell us? I mean, just hopping jobs, you know, and saying, it doesn't make a difference. They're going to
That's
leave.
not just the solution. And I think some of the most important things to do, and I love that, you know, you touched on this, is understanding what leads to it and identifying it first is most important, because then you can identify, you know, the interventions necessary to fix it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you're definitely the expert
Yeah.
here, so I'll let you.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I want to say there is that I think, I mean, we talk about it like you just did with your friend as sort of what's happening to the individual. There's a lot of collateral damage that goes on, which is a part of that, which is that we don't do enough to seek each other out, help each other, mentor each other when we see signs of problems, rather than putting that person down as, you know, not going to get a promotion, not going to be on my team, as opposed to this is somebody who, for whatever, is struggling. We're getting more of this culture of fear where you don't want to speak up about, I can't really quite figure out the solution. I wish I had some good advice. I'm not feeling so well. I've got an emergency in my family, but I can't leave. All of these kinds of things is you can't turn to somebody. You know, with suicide is often this thing of you feel alone even though you're in the midst of a lot of people because you feel you can't. And when you say your friend was looking happy, what we often find is what I would call pluralistic ignorance, which is that we're so afraid of letting other people think we're not so good or we've got a problem or, you know, not coping well today, that we put on this happy face. I'm fine, I can do it, you know. And you look around, everybody's, I'm fine, I'm whatever. Nobody knows. And so sometimes some of the data that you can share with people, you know, anonymously is like, you know, 42.5% of you said the following. It's kind of like everybody's looking at each other saying, wait a minute, you know.
The reassurance, like, you're
Yeah.
not crazy. This isn't in your head.
Yeah, it's actually,
it's real.
Yeah.
there's something, well, but it gives the things, it's not that it's blaming the person. There's something, whatever, that didn't work, but that actually there's more of us who kind of go in and out of those kind of bad days, good days, all that kind of thing. And trying to realize that other people, and that includes your colleagues at work, particularly because they understand what you do better than anybody else on the planet and could be your best resource. And rather than being your worst enemy and, you know, whatever, how do we build more of that kind of real partnership, mentorship? Are we looking at the people who are coming up? You know, the newbies, the ones who are going to be in our footsteps, are we helping them? Are we working with people? Do we see signs and say, wow, what's happening with you? I've got this sick child, my parent, da-da-da-da. Why don't you take off early? I'll cover, you know, something that really provides that kind of social support and network, which is one of the best things for well-being, psychologically, of any individual.
Now, I would say quickly, like,
Yeah.
reach out to your peers, reach out to your colleagues. Also understand, like, if you're in that situation, get help, right? Like, friends are there, colleagues are there, help someone if you can, but also, like,
But there are places for help
therapists
too.
are wonderful.
Yeah.
Therapists are lovely,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Yeah, and I think that
And without
yeah.
blame. I mean, there's
Oh,
no...
no.
But that's the key thing. I mean, I
Yeah.
have talked to people who say, yeah, we have a wellness committee now. And it says, if you're having a bad problem, come see us. And then you get targeted as the person who went in the
Went to the
door
wellness.
because,
Yep.
so what does that say about you? So there's still, I talked recently at a conference, RSA conference, with people who are in cybersecurity work. Huge, difficult kind of work.
No, that's my background. I
That's
know.
your background, so I don't have
Yeah.
to say why. But one of the interesting things that was sort of coming out, and I was learning a lot from this, was they were talking about how hard they have to work, how, they love the 80-hour work week so much, we do 2 of them. Cynicism is our core competency, all of this kind of thing. And they were talking about that globally, I think it was on the order of, we have 4 million jobs unfilled, which is why we have to work 2 80-hour weeks, because we don't have these other people. But in talking to a lot of people, it became clear that part of what's happening is not that they're not hiring, they're hiring all the time. And people are coming in, starting to work and saying,
churn.
are you kidding me?
Yeah, no,
Am
you
I
churn
going to
right
work
out.
in this environment? No, thank you, I'm out of here.
The burnout is incredibly difficult. I mean, the
Yeah.
joke sometimes is it's much more pronounced, but my background was I was an engineer, but I was ops for a long time. The joke is that your job is to say no all the time. That job is exhausting.
I mean,
when all
security,
you
that
ever
is
do
the
is
job. We're the people who
when
say
all you
no.
ever do is say no,
Yeah.
you are the bad guy.
Yeah.
Always.
Well, it's not only that.
Always,
We
yeah.
say no all the time, and bad stuff happens anyway. because-
Exactly.
I mean, when you
yeah.
said I was
Yeah.
like tweeting your talk yesterday.
yeah, oh, yeah.
And when you said the best day you ever have is when nothing goes wrong.
Yeah. And you're saying,
No
okay,
one
got there.
notices
You say no, no one notices you.
Right.
Yeah.
There is no thanks for that.
There's no positive like, wow, that was pretty good because we didn't have
I mean, I
any
used to
complaints.
joke, there's no joy and I told you so. That's
Yeah.
all you can ever do is say no and I told you so.
Yeah.
No one loves you.
It's going to be,
No,
yeah.
no. I founded a company that made security products, and we used to call them the bad news generators because that's what they are. They're the bad news generators. But Dr. Spear, I'd like to get you more involved here.
Yeah.
Can't let you off the hook.
No, so I had some thoughts on the
Go ahead.
cause of this and perhaps the corrective actions. So one is a management metaphor that might not be right, and it misses sort of basic human need. So the management metaphor you're sort of alluding to is this idea that there's almost like a Moneyball approach to assessing people, that people have roles and you can assess how well people can play that role, and as a result you can insert them into a system, and when they burn out you can pull them out, and then there's a clean replacement for that. So your whole notion of 36 months of people sort of being ejected from the system and a new piece coming in, almost like Borg-like. It strikes me that when you're dealing with work that's complex, rapidly evolving, and that kind of thing, that the interdependencies amongst people are not as clean and modular as that, and that to assume that you can just put someone into a role and have them quickly assume that role and execute it well without all the team building to understand interdependencies and roles and compensations for each another. So you're already setting people up for failure because you're treating them in a way which is incompatible with the needs of the system. The other part is human need, which is most people need community. And so if you're treating them as interchangeable modules, but really what they want is a sense of community, shared purpose, role, responsibility, accountability in 2 directions, you're going to leave them very, very exposed. And it's kind of ironic that the sort of at the tail end of burnout, the remediation is to try and create this emotional infrastructure. You know, talk to your friends. Well, I don't have any because you manage me in a way that I don't have it. Talk to your colleagues. I don't know their names. I have no concern for them, and they have no concern for me.
And they're
So-
changing every 18 months
right,
anyway.
they're changing every
So
18 months, right? Which I don't have a relationship with them anyway. So there's sort of this espousal to create this emotional infrastructure, precisely because it hadn't existed for that 18 months, 3 years before someone got ejected from the
It's
system.
it's $1 late and a day short.
Right.
yeah.
So But and here's the thing in my mind, and I'm interested, and you probably have something on this from your research, Nicole. You know, it's one thing for a company to say, well, look, we do the best we can. And quite frankly, if they don't fit, we're going to move them out in 18 months anyway. It's someone else's problem. But the fact of the matter is, companies who have that attitude, they're not the high performers, and they don't build high performing teams, right? As counterintuitive as it may seem, the companies that give a crap, that do something to make it a better workplace, to make it better for individuals to feel part of a team, to feel part, I don't want to use the word family, but
Yeah.
you know, I've been lucky enough to co-found about 4 or 5 companies in my career. Currently, you know, this one, and it's a small company, but I go out of my way to make it inclusive like that, because I think there's a payoff there, right? It may seem dollars and cents stupid to invest in that, but it's really the smartest money you can invest. And I know your research has shown some of this.
Yeah, I mean, we absolutely see that, and this is echoed in research across several different types of fields, that cultures that optimize for psychological safety, as well as information flow and risk taking and team building, predict better outcomes in terms of software delivery performance, but also in terms of organizational performance. And this really reminds me about, you know, what you said yesterday. If burnout is the canary in the coal mine, you don't give the canary oxygen, you fix the coal mine.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's a tendency to focus too much on the individual and what's going on within the person, and neglecting the fact that there are many individuals, and together there is a larger social community and environment and climate and conditions and whatever. And we keep forgetting that that's part of the whole, you know, the whole problem. And so that's why I have to sort of say, always to make it clear, I'm not against taking care of yourself and being healthy and so forth. But in this case, there's this larger thing. And if there's a lot of people who are beginning to have these kind of problems and showing these kind of signs, you've really got to ask the question, what are we not doing right to actually allow people to really thrive and actually be able to do the kinds of things that they might be capable of? And I think your comment to me earlier about, you know, do we ever really do enough in teaching people how to bring out the best in others, that's your main responsibility, is really to say it's about other people and there's, you know, what's possible and how do you encourage them? Because whether we're talking about burnout or we're talking about engagement, what makes people tick? What makes them engaged? It's not going to be whip cracking, you know, or something like that. It's going to be because you're finding something that, wow, you get really excited about, or here's an opportunity and let me spend some time working on that, or this is fun, or this, you know, how do we, you know, in a sense, energize, you know, those kind of core needs that people need to get out there and do all that great stuff. And so I think that's part of it. Even with some of the definitions of engagement, they still kind of come back to focusing on, you know, there's 3 types of engaged people. There's the engaged, the not engaged, the actively disengaged. It's kind of like if you have a hammer, everything's a nail. Okay, so
right.
there, you know, and the engaged, somehow they've found out how to do that. And the not engaged are people who are just punching in and punching out, and they're waiting for the next break, and they're not working very much. They're the majority. And the actively disengaged may be burned out, but they are trying to undermine other people.
Right.
It's all saying you, and not what are the things that we can do, bringing you in, that actually can get more people engaged or get, you know, have less of the risk of the stress, burnout, and so forth. So
I agree.
always coming back to that environmental kind of focus.
I mean, here's just another way we could look at it too. In an age where I have a friend of mine who's the CTO of it's actually a British firm moving to America in the gambling business.
Okay.
You know, football gambling is legal. He's hiring developers and DevOps engineers, paying $250,000 to $300,000 a year for a good, full stack developer. If you could afford, plus benefits, if you could afford to pay a developer that kind of money, how can you not afford to take some fraction additionally to make sure that he's successful in, or he or she, obviously, is successful in your environment, right? And giving him a work, or again, he or she, giving them a workplace that they're going to thrive in. Seems like small potatoes. Compared to the 300 plus you're paying them in salary.
Yeah, well, that's where I think, the point is that it's an organizational remit, right? And I think your point earlier when we were chatting about, I think you listed a couple of organizations that do it particularly well, was really interesting.
Yeah, so you think about the people who get to manage other people. I mean, there are two things. One is if you volunteer to take on that role where you accept authority, with that, someone else has volunteered to give you responsibility for them. And I don't think we often talk in terms of that tightly coupled responsibility with the authority. That if I'm getting the discretion to tell others what to do, I have to do that with a clear eye to their well-being, right? So that's one. Now, as to why that sense of responsibility tightly coupled with authority is not part of people's thinking, I think most organizations, and we were discussing this beforehand, most organizations don't deliberately cultivate that kind of situational awareness in those who get authority and forget they have responsibility. You take people who have often backgrounds in some kind of technical profession or scientific profession where their education, at least the early parts of their career, have been solving the problems in front of them. And now they've been elevated to now they're responsible for a system. And while they may be good system thinkers on the technical scientific, they've never actually been engaged or encouraged to think about how to create a collaborative system of other people.
Right.
And so now they're stuck with this responsibility authority, which is not to the technical device in front of them, but to the people whose hands and minds are affecting the technical device. But they haven't been deliberately trained and educated and practiced on how to manage hands and minds.
I just want to emphasize that, a lot of people will complain about, oh my God, I don't have a good manager. And one of the biggest problems we have found over the years going through is finding they get promoted because they're really good, like you say, at making widgets. And they're going to supervise the team, but they have not gotten any training, any support. How do you talk and manage people who are now going to build the widgets?
A single contributor, a good single contributor doesn't make a great manager. I mean, I've learned this lesson the hard way. In my career of promoting people, if they were a great developer or they're a great ops person or a security admin, doesn't mean they're going to lead the group real well.
And so it's like you need to actually prepare them and train them and kind of give them the tools, if you will. If you're going to ask them to be doing this job, they need that kind of thing to realize that you can't go and do X because actually that's in violation of, the common practice. What you have to do instead is, et cetera. So that lack of training, of focus, of the responsibility that, I think those are key issues.
All of them are. So I find this personally fascinating. I'd love to sit here all day, but we're at a half hour.
Well, you're going to have to come to our panel because
I will come to
more
the panel.
time.
Can I bring the cameras with me? But actually, your panel will be filmed and it'll be up on YouTube on the IT Rev YouTube.
Well, I'm going to make sure we get that question in on the panel then because I want to hear the rest of your answer.
No, this is fantastic.
I think it's a good thing.
The three of you, thank you so much for spending more than a couple of minutes with us. But fascinating conversation. By the time you're watching this, the panel would have already happened, but go check out the IT Rev YouTube channel and you can grab the panel. There's a bunch of panels, well, not a bunch, but Dr. Maslick, Dr. Spear have been at least one or two others that I've seen. Dr. Nicole, of course, has been in several. Check them all out. They're all there on the IT Rev channel. A lot of our interviews over the years are also on the DevOps TV channel on YouTube. But anyway, we're going to call a wrap on this one. Again, thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Alan Schimmel for DevOps.com on the Digital Anarchist platform from London does 2019. Thanks, everyone.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
Hey everyone, hope you enjoyed that panel on burnout. And you know, when we spoke about burnout for that panel, we were really talking about burnout in the workplace. But with everyone working from home, a couple of things. Number one, you can have burnout from home because, especially for those people who are not used to working from home, it's very hard to learn to shut the on-off switch down. Right? People actually wind up working more hours at home than they do in the office because there's no switch of, light to dark, on or off. And so you can do that. And then on top of that, we're all locked in. And so you're feeling isolated, alone, anxiety and stress, all of these things figure in. And that's why taking some of the advice of Dr. Maslick and Dr. Forsgren and Dr. Spears, pay attention to it, be cognizant of it, reach out to people if you're all alone. So excellent piece of video right there. The next part of our show today is I wanted to go over some of the headlines, some of the bigger articles and trends that we're seeing in the news, both on our own media ops site, devops.com, Security Boulevard, and Container Journal, as well as the news in general. So for those of you who, maybe you haven't been following the mainstream, the federal government, the president announced yesterday that we're going to stay in this sort of lockdown, social distancing situation through at least April 30th, and who knows beyond that. So, so for that means for many of you, you're working from home. I think longer term, the issue is, well, can we keep our economy going? Especially in tech, we'll continue to develop applications. Are we going to continue to do marketing? What does this mean for budgets? We have a few articles on that are percolating around. And then, of course, it also brings up the whole thing, well, what does this working from home mean? How does it change things? What do I need to be cognizant of? So I wanted to go over a few articles, though. First of all, I want to highlight an article by my partner Jane Grohl over at the DevOps Institute. Jane is the CEO. The DevOps Institute has really kind of done a little bit of a change of their model, and this was actually in the works before this whole COVID-19 popped up, and that is they're going to an open testing model. It used to be that you had to take, before you can get certified and take the test for any of the DevOps Institute 7 or 8 certifications, you had to first take a class by one of their channel partners, or one of their registered education partners, and then after completing the course, you can then take the test. DevOps Institute is now offering you the ability to take the test without taking the course. Not that they don't recommend you still take the course, because passing these tests aren't easy. But if you want to self-learn, or you think you have already all the knowledge necessary to be certified, you can take the test and achieve your certification. So Jane does a nice job with that. It's over on devops.com. Have a look at the article. And if you're interested in becoming certified in any of the disciplines that DevOps Institute is offering, head over to devopsinstitute.com for information. Another article I wanted to mention was actually published last Friday, and it's from my friend George Hume. George has been covering the IT tech space for 25 years, and he he does a great job. And this is really an article. He looked at what a bunch of analysts are saying on what this whole coronavirus, the COVID-19 thing, is going to mean for global IT spend. To give you an idea, as I think the global IT market is something like a $3 trillion market worldwide. And a lot of analysts are saying that this may very well hit the brakes on global IT spending. Now, of course, this is conjecture. We have to see how it plays out. Do we do what they call a V-shaped recovery? Is it more of a gradual slope recovery? Regardless, I will tell you, as someone who's lived through, unfortunately, multiple IT spending freezes, it will come back, right? And I think really the question is just how long does it last, right? And I think we're all going to hunker down for a little bit, but I'm an optimist, and I'm hoping this comes back. If by April 30th, May 1st, we see a real flattening of the curve, as they say, and not just here in the U.S., though I think the U.S. probably will represent the epicenter in terms of pure numbers. But if we could see the world turn the corner here, I think our spending will come back, and I think it'll come roaring back in hopefully Q3 and 4. So while I think we will see a short-term break in spending, that also isn't for everyone, because certain industries will thrive in this environment, right? The work from home kind of technologies, the remote and automation technologies. So, I'm not a sky is falling kind of person. I wouldn't give up your jobs just yet. And just keep plugging away at home there, folks. Another thing I wanted to talk about was an article that Mike Vizard highlighted, wrote last week. I wanted to highlight. This was about a company that I met over at the TechStars Air Force Accelerator in Boston, run by a couple of Air Force vets, and their technology was really to be able to print with 3D printers airplane parts at remote bases, rather than shipping parts to these bases for the planes. If you could securely print them on site and cut out that whole supply chain logistics stuff. So the name of the company is Veritex, and the president is James Reginor. They've now pivoted in this environment, and they are now setting up plans to allow hospitals with 3D printers to 3D print ventilators right on site. And they think that something like 10 ventilators a day to 100 ventilators a day can be printed by a hospital. I don't know enough about 3D printing to tell you if that's true or not, but I surely hope it is. The company's looking for some seed funding and getting some pilots off the ground. Of course, we've seen a lot of news about the ventilators, and the folks at Dyson recently delivered 1,200 or so ventilators in UK, a new model that they've manufactured, and they're ramping up. Of course, GM has been prodded, and GM was working on it turns out, before the law was enacted or enforced with them on ramping up our production. The issue will be how fast can they ramp up production? And to me, that's really, this gets into the whole issue of agile and nimble, right? And being able to understand what it is the market needs, what your customers want, and how do you respond to that in a nimble way. And again, like I said earlier about companies that will thrive in this environment, the companies that are able to pivot, are able to be nimble and do that, are the companies that will thrive. So great article by Mike Vizard. All 3 or 4 of those articles I just mentioned are on devops.com. Next, I wanted to run over and talk a little bit about some of our Security Boulevard coverage. I will tell you that this month has been a record-setting month for Security Boulevard. In spite of everything that's going on, we've had about 500,000 unique visitors visit us at Security Boulevard, which is a pretty high watermark for us. And what are they coming for? Well, what they're coming for breaks down into two, in my mind, two categories. One are the articles about how to safely and securely handle your remote workers. And, because there's over 400 blogs in the Security Bloggers Network that are published on Security Boulevard, we publish 50 to 70 articles a day. There's something there for everyone. So go check out Security Boulevard if you want, and we have it broken down in areas and you could look. But as I said, two things I wanted to highlight. First was the security of workers working at home. The biggest thing we're seeing in there is how to set up Zoom. How to set up Zoom in a secure manner. There's this whole concept now of Zoom bombing. So a lot of people, they'll publish their public Zoom room or Zoom address, and anyone can just log in. But there are settings in Zoom where you can make it so that not anyone can just log in, that there's a waiting room, that you password protect your Zoom meeting address, and etc. There's 3 or 4 different articles out on Security Boulevard about setting up Zoom, as well as, things a little lighter, like what are the top Zoom backgrounds. Everyone today wants to use a green screen type of Zoom background in there, and it's great. But, which ones, you're going to be careful, are you giving out any information in that background that you shouldn't be? So good articles on that. Zoom's certainly one of the heroes of this whole thing, right? We're all Zooming. But do check out those articles. There's other ones, though, also around VPN usage and identity and access control, and no shortage of articles around that. And there's plenty of coverage there. Check it out. The other issue I wanted to bring up, and this is one that, frankly, it upsets me, and that is cyber criminals taking advantage of COVID. Why wouldn't they? They take advantage of everything else to perpetrate attacks and fraud and chaos on all of our systems. I was encouraged to see that several, hacking rings or gangs or ransomware groups actually came out and said that they would not attack hospitals, healthcare providers during this time. And thank God for their humanity and their on that, and I applaud that, and I hope it stays like that. But, of course, there are others who don't have those kind of morals, who see this as an opportunity to enrich themselves, and they're already scamming. Especially now you've got older people isolated at home who may not be sophisticated users. So bunch of different phishing attacks and kinds of attacks based on this. And I just, what could you say? These people, where is their humanity? But we got to be vigilant about it, right? We always need to be vigilant about it. The other thing that we're going to, I think, start seeing now is sort of the butting of heads of trying to lock things down as a result of this situation, abutting privacy and rights of individuals, and we're seeing it even in Russia with the use of facial recognition and measuring body temperature and stuff, to here in the U.S. about whether or not you can get locked down and what you should have access to and so forth. This is going to be something for the courts to determine, but I also believe that we are in a situation today where public safety has to trump, no pun intended there, public safety has to trump everything else in public health. And so while I'm usually a big fan of personal rights and preserving our freedoms and privacy, I think these are extraordinary times that call for extraordinary measures. And so we'll continue, I think, to see this play out. But at the end of the day, I think public health concerns have to win. Finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about Container Journal, right? Because more than at the other two sites, Container Journal remains dedicated to cloud native technologies and Kubernetes. And we are seeing you know, we're seeing the continued development of the ecosystem. This has not stopped Kubernetes deployments. It has not stopped new versions coming out and companies, you know, bringing out what they need to do here. The whole idea of automation and everything that containers and Kubernetes and cloud native works to actually plays well in the COVID environment. I was also heartened to see that last week the Cloud Native Computing Foundation announced that Cloud Native Con KubeCon for Europe, which was postponed, I think it was actually supposed to be this week in Amsterdam, has now been rescheduled for August 13th and 16th. They stuck the flag in the ground. I thought it was a bold move. I hope everything's good by then, because I'm looking forward to going and being there and with our Digital Anarchist crew broadcasting live from there. But they did say that if we're not in a position to do live conferences at that point, they are prepared at that point to turn Cloud Native Con KubeCon into a virtual event. But let's hope not. That would be a great coming out party, I think, for the whole cloud native ecosystem if we can hold KubeCon in person in Amsterdam on August 13th and 16th. I pray so. And we'll see. We'll be keeping our eye on that as sort of a canary in the coal mine to see where we go there. I think that's going to be it for the news today. I don't want to take a lot of time, but I do encourage you, go to devops.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard to, we're actually backed up with content. We're publishing as much as we can daily. There's a ton of great information out there, so please check them out. With that, though, I want to go into our next segment. In our next segment, we feature Media Ops Managing Editor Charlene O'Hanlon with 2 interviews that she's done over the past few months. The first is our friend Tracy Reagan, who is besides being the CEO of Deploy Hub, she's also a board member at Continuous CDF and very involved with the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. And I think you'll enjoy this interview with Tracy, with Charlene as well. And let's go over to that, and then I'll be back to introduce our next video.
This is Digital Anarchist at KubeCon, Cloud Native Con, San Diego 2019.
Hey, good morning, everyone. This is Alan Schimmel from San Diego, keeping it classy here at KubeCon, Cloud Native Con. We are on the Digital Anarchist Network, so thanks for joining us. We are streaming to you live today on Facebook, LinkedIn, DevOps TV on YouTube. We're on DevOps.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard. So no matter where you're watching this, or maybe you're watching it on demand, thanks for joining us. I'm going to be hosting the interviews here for the next 3 days. We have a ton of great speakers, celebrities, folks, just practitioners here attending KubeCon. I want to mention from the outset that this year's broadcast on Digital Anarchist Live is sponsored by our friends at GitLab. So thanks very much to GitLab for sponsoring. And we're going to jump right into it with our first guest. The woman on my right is a CEO founder. She's also a board member of the CD Foundation.
Yep.
That's fantastic. And in her spare time, she does a fair amount of development and engineering and has quite a history of doing that as well. Tracy Reagan, CEO Deploy Hub. Tracy, welcome.
Thank you.
Hey, it's great to have you here, first of all.
It's always fun to be here.
I wanted to just mention straight away that I was in the CDF Summit yesterday, and I happened to catch your presentation in the morning.
Oh,
I thought
good.
it was excellent. I thought it was really well received. But the other thing I really liked is it was standing room only in that room.
That was exciting. We sold out. That was really exciting
Yeah.
for our first North American Summit. Here at this show to sell out was really great for us.
Good stuff. And I think it's indicative. I have some feelings we could jump into around the CD Foundation. But let's come back to that. Let's talk about Deploy Hub a little bit.
Yeah.
You guys are a silver sponsor here.
We are silver sponsor.
And of course, Deploy Hub is an open source company as well, right? So it fits
does.
right into
We
this whole
have
cloud native.
Yes, our open
Linux.
source project is called Ortelius.io, based on Abraham Ortelius, who is the first atlas maker of the world.
That's right.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And so what are you finding exciting?
Well, first of all, we have an announcement. We have a new release coming out. So our 9.0 release is out, which enhances the mapping of microservices in visual ways.
Very cool.
Does some other updates to make the platform a little more easier to adopt, which is some of the complaints we got, so we addressed those. And we're working still on that, but we really focused on the microservices mapping this time, which I'm excited about.
And again, for those who aren't familiar, really Deploy Hub microservices kind of culture. This is going to wrought tremendous change.
Tremendous change
in the industry and the way we do things.
Completely, yeah. Yesterday after my talk, particularly around checking in code and compiling code. So if we think about the way we manage a monolithic application, and I try to keep it as simple as possible, we use a version control tool to do a bit of configuration management, tracking the versions of the source. We check that out and we compile it and we link it. And so we have a binary that we protect. It's really pets, it's not cattle. We protect that binary and we push it across the life cycle and it gets deployed. In microservices, that gets exploded out into many little pieces.
Yeah.
So the check-in, the versioning is still important, but not like it would be if you had a piece of code that's thousands lines long,
right,
where you have multiple developers, you're doing a lot of branching and merging. You have functions, snippets of code, maybe 100 lines, and that doesn't require that kind of branching and merging anymore. It does require versioning though. And then we pull that out, we compile it, and we don't link it. So that's all done at runtime. So we have this shifting methodology where what we used to do in version control and in compiling is now being shifted to the runtime side, which yesterday when I think several people who came up to me afterwards, it was kind of like,
yeah.
It's like, oh no, the build's really not going away. And it was like, well, yeah, you're going to compile stuff, but you're really not going to link things. So that huge step in that configuration management puzzle is now being shifted to runtime, which is a huge shift from what we do now.
Absolutely. And maybe, again, people have not assumptions, but aspirations is a good word. People have aspirations that, well, by moving to microservices, by doing all of these things, we are going to have to get away with, we don't have to do the compiling anymore. We don't have to do...
Yeah, maybe Python does. It's interpreted, so
right.
It doesn't...
But, someone smarter than me once told me that most of the progress we make, especially in the tech field, is more evolutionary than revolutionary. And I think that seems more evolutionary to me, right?
I would say
steps.
that, I've watched the industry change over the course of my career, and we have only a few tsunamis.
Right.
One of the big ones for me was, mainframe to the PC. I jumped as fast as I could to get down onto that platform. And everything.
I'm not going to say anything.
No, don't. And then everything else was kind of a slow step. And then, as I talked about yesterday, I was a tiers developer for IBM, which is an AI platform, and I worked for Farmers Insurance and actuaries. And we realized, and this was in the 90s, we realized then that we did not have processing power to do the kind of massive pattern matching that we needed to achieve our goal. And we didn't ever think it would happen. We really didn't. When I first saw what Kubernetes was doing, and I first started understanding containers, and I started understanding that a GPU, you could go from 15 GPUs to 15,000 in a matter of seconds, I stood up and started running around. I got so excited.
It was pretty exciting.
It was so exciting. And that's when I realized this is a massive shift in the way we think about software, the way we design software, and the way our future is going to look when we go and sit down and start coding.
Yeah.
Because we're going to have microservices that are shared across open source communities. And we're basically, if you think about a service as like a giant neural net, we're basically building a neural net where we can borrow on all of these reusable pieces.
Yeah.
and drag and drop an application and only have to change a tiny part of it to build software.
And that's what scale is about, right? I mean, that's
Yes.
true scale on a massive scale. I wanted to shift a little bit
Yeah.
and talk about open source.
Okay.
I mean, and really, as we look at this line, people can't see because they're facing us. But if you looked at that way, there's a line a mile long for people to get their
swag.
cloud native
Yeah,
T-shirt,
uh-huh.
right? And this whole thing that we're in here, there's I think 12,000 plus people, is really driven by open source,
Totally driven,
right?
yes. Mhm.
And I look at the CDF summit, and I have to tell you, I came in early. I spent the weekend at the Spinnaker Summit, which is now, of course, part of CDF.
Yep.
And what was interesting there is within that community, there appears to be some school of thought that, let's just say they're not 100% jumping up and down doing cartwheels, that Spinnaker is part of CDF, right? They tend to think of it as, their special baby that, in CDF it'll get lost among some of the others. I really believe that what we see here is the blossoming of open source, and the reason is, without saying you're old because you're not old, but you just mentioned you were in the mainframe days, right? You were there when we first started seeing Linux and other open source
And
tools.
then I was on the Eclipse Foundation too.
Oh, Eclipse.
I was on the board there.
Right. And
we
so,
did quite a bit of work trying to figure out what open source looked like and how to monetize it and how to build a governance body to really
and that was
manage
probably early, right?
That
The
was
Eclipse
way
was
early, really
because
early.
back then, open source was sort of free as in freedom and free as in beer, right?
Yeah, and it wasn't governed well.
It
So
was the cathedral and the bazaar.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I've written about this, and I'm going to write about what I saw at Spinnaker Summit this weekend. But I call that the cathedral and bazaar stage of open source, where it was kind of, prehistory, if you will. And it was free as in freedom, free as in beer, anything goes, down with the man, long live the whatever. Then we went through another period, I would say, in the early 2000s through 2012, where I call it the Big Brother period of open source, where every open source project that was semi-successful seemed to have a sugar daddy or a daddy Warbucks that
Yeah.
managed it.
Eclipse at IBM.
Eclipse was IBM.
Yeah.
I don't mean to single out anyone. All of the open source,
Had somebody behind.
right,
Yes.
they had a sponsor.
Yes.
And those sponsors really kind of, in a lot of cases, ran those open source projects for their own benefit, more than the benefit necessarily of the community.
Of the community, yes.
They preached
Of
the
the
community,
ecosystem,
but
yeah.
that's how they monetized it.
Yeah.
And now, you look at Linux Foundation and their model here in the cloud native and CDF, and we're in the foundation era of open source, where no one vendor should dictate an open source
And
project.
no one vendor, especially if you think about, take Spinnaker, coming out of Netflix.
And Google. Yeah.
Netflix, they are a technology company, but they're not, I'm not so sure how quickly they want to run out and start selling enterprise software.
No.
So they have this great platform that can benefit the community, and they can be of service to the community as a whole. A foundation's a perfect place to contribute it
Yes.
to, so that it can have the governing board, it can have the ecosystem, and it can be outside of a pure Netflix controlled environment.
Right. It's not a big brother.
It's not a big brother.
It's truly a foundation.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think this foundation era of open source has set afire everything that we see here, right? All of the excitement, the buzz, the flourishing.
It validates it.
Well, it
validates
enables
it.
it too, though, because
yes,
people
yeah.
don't have to feel. I'll use Jenkins, and CloudBees was an excellent mentor, sponsor, whatever you want to call it, of Jenkins. But a lot of companies, as well as practitioners who maybe wanted to use Jenkins or do things with Jenkins or contribute code to Jenkins, maybe were hesitant to do so because it would benefit, let's say, CloudBees. And I don't mean to call them out. They were actually a very benevolent partner to Jenkins, as these open source projects go. But now when it's in with a foundation, I don't have to worry that I'm doing it for the benefit of just one vendor. It really is community.
It's totally
Everyone
an ecosystem.
gets to use it
Yes.
and go with it.
Yeah, no, it really does. It elevates the open source product line to a level where there's a governance board, and enterprises then are less apprehensive about
Right.
adopting it because they know there's a governance board, there's somebody managing it, they have the ability to contribute to that if they want to make sure it's going to be maintained properly. So it does change the game quite a bit for open source.
It is. It's a huge game changer. And I
And
think
it's just in
everything we
time for
see-
this shift in modern architecture.
Well,
It's just in time.
well, it's a question. It's a chicken and an egg question.
Well,
Did the shift help that, or did this help the shift?
I
And-
think when Google contributed Kubernetes to the Linux Foundation, that was earth-shaking. I mean, we
For
felt the
modern
tremors.
architecture,
Yes,
yeah.
we felt the tremors. That was huge.
Android for phone systems.
Yes.
I mean, there's been. You can point to several, but yeah,
It's
interesting
a great
stuff.
time to be in software. It's really exciting. It really is.
You know
I'm
what?
I'm
I
so
gotta
happy
tell
to be
you
in this
something.
business.
I was talking off camera. We're staying in an Airbnb off, about 10 minutes from the convention center. I was in the car with my team this morning, and we, were stuck in traffic, just pulling into the parking lot. There's not a lot of traffic
Yeah.
in San Diego. It wasn't
No.
terrible, but here at the convention center, with all the traffic, and I turned around and I said to my team, you know what? We're blessed to be here at this period in time.
We
I mean,
are.
What a great time to be in this industry, to be seeing the developments that we're seeing, the innovation,
We are the
buzz.
generation that's going to build the platform for tomorrow's AI and ML technologies.
So I was already part of one generation that was going to change the world. Didn't work out so good, but let's hope this one does.
This one does. We just, and there's all kinds of topics around AI and what the future will look like with that. It could be a dangerous future for us, but it's
it'll
not
be
going to be.
exciting.
Like I said in my talk yesterday, 47% of U.S. jobs will be replaced by AI and machine learning. It's a lot of jobs.
And if people
but there'll
don't
be a
get their head
massive
around
new jobs created,
Yep.
and we have to get our head around it, and we have to understand what it means.
I agree. All right, Tracy, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
This is Tracy Reagan, CEO, founder of Deploy Hub, board member of CDF. She's joining us live as we're part of the insanity of the show floor here at Cloud Native Con, KubeCon San Diego. This is Alan Schimmel. Thanks for joining us on the Digital Anarchist Network. Stay tuned. We'll have our next guest up shortly. Hey everyone, hope you enjoyed that interview with Tracy Reagan. Tracy's a really bright woman, always with just great insight on what to say. I enjoy listening and interviewing Tracy as well. I want to introduce another Charlene O'Hanlon interview, and that is from our recent coverage at the RSA conference this February, and it features Alan Vance of Beyond Trust. And again, this was from Digital Anarchist Live at RSA. This is Charlene O'Hanlon and Alan Vance.
This is Digital Anarchist at RSA San Francisco 2020.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, managing editor at Media Ops. We put out DevOps.com, Container Journal, Security Boulevard, and the Digital Anarchist media platform. We are winding up day 3 of the RSA 2020 conference. I cannot believe how many good conversations we've had over the course of the last 2-3 days. And my last victim, so to speak, is Alan Vance, right?
That's right.
VP of Product at Beyond Trust. And I'm so excited that you're here and you're closing things out for me.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be here, Charlene.
Yeah, great. So we've had many conversations about DevSecOps. We've had many conversations about application security. We have not had one conversation about identity and access management. And I know that's what your company is involved in, privileged access management. So I figured, well, let's have a conversation about identity management first, because what can be done to make it better?
Sure. Well, the way the industry is pretty much recognized to be organized is that what we do, privileged access management at Beyond Trust, as you say, is a part of identity and access management. I mean, if you don't get a hold of identity, you're not ever going to solve your problems, right? It is absolutely fundamental to anything else you do. And that identity problem has gotten worse because we're not, as opposed to in the olden days, which would be 1990,
Right.
we're not just talking
Oh,
about
so
human
long ago.
identities,
Right.
We're talking about application identities and OT, IoT, and all those things, right? You talked about containers, ephemerals, applications, and cloud. So IAM really broadly, though, defines the concepts of who are the entities or actors in the system, and what do I want to allow them to be able to do. And if you start from there, you get into identity governance, and how do you make the rules and who gets to do what, and tracking that and what actually happened versus what was supposed to happen. And to move over into PAM in particular, where we deal with things is that, you and I have laptops, whatever, we have an account, we log in,
Yep.
we have credentials, but it's the privileged credentials that are the problem, right? The sysadmin on Windows, the
Right.
root essentially on a Mac or Linux, Unix device. And Forrester research says that 80% of successful data breaches at some point involve the use of a privileged credential. So we have solutions that do various things in that category, just very briefly, from finding and securing in a software vault those credentials and only allowing them to be used in a very controlled way, which is audited, from actually moving admin privileges from end users, administrators as well, but replacing that with a set of technology and a policy that still allows them to do what they need to do in a very capable, granular way with no friction or even awareness on their part. And then finally, a secure remote access set of products. When I am on the help desk, for example, or I'm on an external vendor, and I'm connecting into or through your network, I'm often using privilege and connecting to sensitive assets. Think of the help desk has got, the CEO has a board meeting she's going to and her laptop dies.
Right.
So somebody's got to fix that, but you kind of really want to know what they're actually doing on there, right? So those sort of use cases are
I got unstable connection. This is not good. And able to feed. Are you on it now? Okay. hold on a second. Yep, I got them on Yahoo right now. Okay, so I'm not able to do this. I'm going to hit end event right now.